Talkline Network Radio, America's longest-running Jewish broadcast network, the voice of the Jewish community.
Welcome to the podcast. And now,
you're listening to Talkline with Zev Brenner, America's premier Jewish broadcast on the air since 1981.
And now, here's your host.
Welcome back to the program. I'm Zev Brenner. Always a privilege, a treat to have the legendary, I was going to say Lou Grant, but he's really Ed Asner. He's famous for his portrayal on TV. He's an American actor, a voice actor, former president of the Screen Actors Guild. You know him as being Lou Grant in the 1970s and 1980s on both the Mary Tyler Moore Show and the Lou Grant Show. He's the most honored male performer in the history of the Primetime Emmy Awards. And he's also on the Entertainment Board Directors of Survivor Mitzvah Project, a nonprofit organization dedicated to providing direct emergency aid to elderly, impoverished Holocaust survivors in Eastern Europe. His brand new book is called Son of Junkman, My Life from the West Bottoms of Kansas City to the Bright Lights of Hollywood. Ed Asner, thank you for joining us.
I want to send you some air.
Well, there's a lot of hot air going on today, right, all over the country.
Sure is.
But if I remember correctly, your given name is Yitzchak.
Well, every Jew who has any identification with the religion is given a Hebrew name. That's my Hebrew name.
You still use it at all today? Does anybody call you Yitzchak? Aside from me?
But, I mean, some people cleverly think that they discovered it for the first time. So I have to disabuse them.
Now, you grew up Orthodox. You were the youngest of 5 children. Your parents came from the Ukraine. So
my mother did. My father came from Belarus.
From Belarus, okay. And your father was a junkman and a businessman.
Yeah.
Orthodox, You grew up in a religious household. What was that like?
Well, it's what I call, it's Midwest Orthodox. We kept kosher. We celebrated. My father didn't walk to the synagogue; he drove. It was too goddamn far, and we adapted as we could. He wouldn't smoke on Shabbos, which was certainly a big effort on his part, and I don't know. I went to religious school every day of my life, and finally bar mitzvahed. It was a terrible bar mitzvah.
What was so terrible about it?
Oh, I was pitched too high, and I went too fast, and I was made a nervous wreck by my father and my uncle. So it was not a pleasant experience.
Did you enjoy Cheder, the Hebrew school?
No, because I was double dealt by the rabbi. When I first started, he said all the young kids will go 4 days a week, and the older kids, knowing he'd get a revolt from them if he asked more, will go 2 days a week. Well, all of a sudden one day I turn around, and I'm the oldest kid there, and I'm the only one going 4 days a week, and the younger kids are going 2 days a week. And I tearfully mentioned this to my rabbi, who tried to solace me, but failed. So I finally was bar mitzvahed, and I declared my freedom.
When you declared your freedom, it meant what exactly?
Well, he had created a ploy of getting all bar mitzvahs to sign a contract saying they'd continue religious school for another year. I don't know if I signed it or not, but I didn't continue for another year.
What did your father and mother think about that?
They accepted it. They didn't bring it up, and I didn't fight it.
Now, Do you remember anything that you learned in Hebrew school or for your bar mitzvah?
Well, like what?
Well, you speak Yiddish, if I'm not recall, correct?
I learned that from my folks.
From your phone, not in the school, but as far as I remember, I speak to people who had a bar mitzvah many years. They can still chant from their Haftorah or from the Torah portion.
No. I blotted that all out. I still read Hebrew. I can recite the opening prayers of Baruch Hu es Adonai Hamoro, Baruch Adonai Baruch Le'olam Moed, and on and on and on.
So you still remember that. Now, to your father was concerned about Yiddishkeit, about Judaism. He tried as hard as he could to instill those values in both you and your siblings. How did that work out? Because I believe your brothers. In other words,
well, my father had a mean stepmother, and he was chopping woods in the forests of Belarus from the age of 12. So he was uneducated himself. And he came to this country uneducated. He didn't have the wherewithal to tell us what we were missing by going on to higher education in Judaism. So what can I tell you?
So growing up,
we became educated in English and the ways of the world that way.
But you celebrated Shabbos every week, the holidays. What was that like?
Yeah.
Now, from what I understand, is that your father was concerned about maintaining Judaism, and he didn't want his kids to marry out of the faith. Your brother Ben married out, and your sister broke up a relationship he had during the war with a guy who wasn't Jewish. What about yourself?
Well, I come from I'm the youngest of 5. And when I married, my wife went through a mild conversion to gratify me, not anybody else. And we led a moderate Jewish life.
Now, you waited until your father passed away before you married.
Yeah.
Because that would have upset your father, in your opinion? Is that why you waited?
Well, I don't know. My fear was of such an extent that I wasn't going to risk it.
Now, your maternal grandfather was a Yiddish scholar who made wine for Pesach during the years of the Prohibition. Tell us about that.
How much does this have to do with son of a junkman?
Well, this is part of your background. This is part of your history.
Yeah.
We're going to get to Lou Grant later on. Don't worry.
All right. Yeah, we lived on the Kansas side of Kansas City. And my grandfather still lived on the Missouri side. And he would make wine. I have no idea how often. But his neighbor found out that he was making wine, and I don't know if he was selling it or what. But he threatened him with exposure because Prohibition was on. So my grandfather was a gentleman, and he was very frightened. He told my mother, who in turn told my father. My father said, "Don't worry, I'll take care of it." The next morning, he got in his car, he drove over to my grandfather's house, and he said, "Stay in the back, I'll handle this." He went in the house. Eventually, the neighbor came over and hollered through the screen door, "Seliger," that was my grandfather's name. "You got my money?" And my father posed as my grandfather. Yeah, come on in. He came in and he beat the hell out of him.
Wow.
He said, "Is that enough money?" The guy never bothered him.
Never bother him again.
Yeah.
That's how I guess how your father dealt with anti-Semites in those days.
Yeah. That's he. I was told of, and this is post-mortem, told of another incident where he beat the crap out of some guy who owed him money, and he paid forthwith.
What impact did your growing up Orthodox have, or if any, on your career going into movies and acting and television? Did it have any impact on you, or did it shape your acting in any kind of way?
I think I tended to inwardly base the bossy Lou Grant of Mary Tyler Moore on my brothers, who were big and scheming and loud. Well, the older brother was loud. My middle brother was not loud. But the two were a combo. And then when it came time for me to do the dramatic Lou Grant, I realized I couldn't base that character on my inner Mary Tyler Moore Lou Grant. I had to find somebody else. And I turned more inward and found the dramatic Lou Grant within me.
What were some of the challenges that you had with this series? What was it like interacting with Mary Tyler Moore and some of the other ones?
What do you mean? I don't know what you mean.
No, I want to know, did you have any challenges doing the show? Any interesting stories that came about during the years that you did the program?
Not with the dramatic Lou Grant. Once I accustomed myself to going inward to search for the character and the response and the basis. The problems receded into the background. I had no problem.
But what kind of problems did you have? Was it just dealing with the character? Did you have other people on the set? What are some of the issues that you...
I mean, it was an automatic response. I couldn't tell you because I wasn't even aware. If I was presented with a problem in the show, I merely reacted as I would have as Ed Asner, I guess.
Ed Asner is our guest. I like to call him Yitzchak. He's the legendary Ed Asner, legendary movie, TV star, and he's written a fascinating book called Son of a Junkman, dealing with his biography and his career throughout.
Read it?
I'm sorry?
Have you read it?
I've read excerpts of the book. That's where I got some of the information that I have. I got to finish reading it, but I think it's a good book, and I recommend that our audience that they should read it as well. How's the book doing so far?
I don't know. Well, unfortunately, we had to have self-publish, so we have very little. It's sold everywhere, Amazon, bookstores, but I don't have the totality of results. I can only hope that programs such as yours will help stimulate the sales so that the book will be out there and people can refer to it, because I'm proud of what we put down on print.
Now, you had to self-publish. Is it hard for somebody such as yourself to get a publisher, considering who you are and your prominence in the field?
Yeah.
Why is that? Why do you think that is?
I don't know. I have no idea. But we didn't get a lot of drumbeat.
Interesting, because I would assume that your name, they should have been knocking down the door to publish your book.
Well, they didn't. They didn't.
But I think during today's time and age, people are reading more if they're stuck at home or can't travel as
But
many
they got
places.
to. There's no place to go.
So that's why reading a book such as yours should be fascinating. People know who you are, and you've been around. You've been a fixture for so many years on the scene. So definitely, I think people are interested in hearing by what you have to say, and that's why we're glad that you're joining with us on our broadcast to talk about your accomplishments, your achievements. With that, I know you always like to refer yourself, and you do a homage to your late father, and you say, "I'll always be that Kansas Jew you raised." What do you mean by that?
Well, I identify intensely with being Jewish, or what was being Jewish. I don't observe that much. Everything was intense at that time. I mean, I grew up in the age of Hitler. Yeah, here we are back again.
Did the Holocaust, Hitler, have any impact? You're growing up, was it much discussed? Because
Oh, absolutely. Everything revolved around that. Yeah. I was blackballed from a fraternity when I was in high school, and
because you were Jewish?
Yeah. At least that's what they said. It was a strange affliction. I later joined another fraternity that was even better, but it was an obsession that preoccupied me constantly. It's the fact that my father would give you the back of his hand, but he never hit me. I was made to fear it all my life by my siblings and my mother, but it never came to pass. But it was a preoccupation constantly with me of being hit.
And how did that impact you?
Huh?
How did that impact you? How did that make you feel? How did that shape you?
Well, it was an old humorous cliche. When you're in love, the whole world is Jewish.
It's an album, too.
Yeah. And I think when you're in Kaka, the whole world is Jewish as well. Or the whole world is not Jewish. Let's put it that way.
Well, did you encounter, you mentioned that you were blacklisted because you were Jewish. Did you encounter much anti-Semitism either growing up or in Hollywood? Did you see anti-Semitism?
Oh, in Hollywood? No, I don't think you would do that.
And in
There
growing
was
up?
a girl I liked in the 8th grade. I went to an 8th grade school. And then in a high school. There was a girl I liked. And my best friend, who was the star of the class, was chased by the so-called prettiest girl in the class. And she wanted him to take her out. So he told me that if I asked this other girl that I liked, he would double date with me. So I asked her, and And she said she'd have to ask her parents. And she came back and she said she couldn't go with me. She didn't say it because I was Jewish, but I automatically wrote it off to the fact
that you were Jewish.
Yeah.
But aside from the ghosts,
all that was a preoccupation with me into my entrance into high school. It never materialized. And later on, after I had become a success, I called and said I was coming to town, or whatever town she was in, and we met, and we spent the night in a motel without my even asking. So I think it was her way of repaying the past.
But you never,
whatever the reason was.
But you never asked her and said, "Did you?"
Never asked.
Never asked about that. What? Now, I'm curious. Now, you mentioned before Ed Asner is our guest, Yitzhak Asner is our guest, that you have a moderate Jewish home. How would you describe that? Your practices, your involvement with Judaism today?
I don't practice kosher. I don't. I eat whatever I want, and
Do you miss anything about the Orthodox background growing up, the life, the celebrating some of the holidays? Is anything?
No, nothing.
Nothing at all. Is that because you were turned off by the Cheder, by the Hebrew school?
I do not approve of any organization which controls so much of one's life. Maybe some people need that, but I have my own conscience.
So when you mentioned you have a moderate Jewish life, so there are any practices that you do like, that you do keep, that you do think that are important to maintain?
I would say about the only... No, there is nothing I maintain.
How about...
I identify intensely with being Jewish, of having been Jewish, let's put it that way. But I do not practice.
But you consider yourself to be intensely Jewish today, or do you look at being formally Jewish? Because you mentioned that a couple of times. So is it more of a past thing, or that you were born genetically Jewish, or you feel a strong sense of Jewishness even today?
Yes, the remains are there. I am well aware of people's names, of what they come from. I have strong positions on Israel. I'm well aware of Jews throughout the world, but I myself do not allow myself to be controlled by that.
How about Hanukkah? Is that, and some of the Hanukkah gifts, is that on the lexicon or not really?
Not really. I don't give any gift. If I'm reminded at the time, I might playfully indulge. But it doesn't mean anything to me.
Now, you speak Yiddish, I believe, fluently? Even to
No, it's Pidgin Yiddish.
Pidgin, but you can have a small conversation in Yiddish today. A Yiddish word, a Jewish word.
Was nicht.
Okay. Now you are on the entertainment board of directors for the Survivor Mitzvah Project. Tell us about that.
I don't know. Tell me more. What is
in your biography, it says that it's a non-profit organization dedicated to providing direct emergency aid to elderly and impoverished Holocaust survivors in Eastern Europe.
Yeah.
Was that something?
That's primarily loaning of the name. I don't do that much activity.
Okay. What?
I had relatives who were involved in the Holocaust, naturally. But they're dead or saved. And some of them weren't prize packages.
Is there anything that you would like to portray as a star that you haven't done or would like to do, or any Jewish parts or anything that you'd like to? I don't know if you did any Jewish roles over the course of time, but is there any role that you would love to play that you haven't?
No.
Okay. And what is going to be your next project? Because I know you've written this new book, which I tell people to get, called Son of Junkman, My Life from the West Bottoms from Kansas City to the Bright Lights of Hollywood, self-published. What's your next project?
We don't know. We're going to be I do two one-man shows, more or less. One is A Man and His Prostate, which deals with my writer's own tourist with his prostate at a certain time in his life. And the other is God Knows.
Okay. But
in which I play God, and a young couple who is drafted from whatever venue we're in, who were formerly lovers, but split because of ideological differences. One's a moderate, the other's a conservative, and God tries to reconcile their differences, and generally fails. But it's a good piece for viewing at this time of election.
now you and George Burns have the distinct honor of playing God.
Yes, he did a very good job.
Before I let you go, did you ever contemplate or think about maybe portraying Tevye, like in the Fiddler on the Roof? I think you would make an excellent Tevye. Playing like a Tevye role in Fiddler on the Roof, I think you'd make an excellent Tevye.
No, nobody has ever approached me on that.
Would you consider
well,
that?
I would be an excellent Tevye.
So you would consider it?
Oh, yeah.
Terrific. So, Yitzhak Asner, Ed Asner, I want to thank you for being with us. You're a legend. You're from the won Emmy Awards, and your new book is called Son of Junkman, My Life from the West Bottoms of Kansas.
Son of a Junkman.
Of a Junkman. Now, somebody looks at Son of Junkman, but a Junkman, My Life from the West Bottoms of Kansas City to the Bright Lights of Hollywood. Thank you for being with us. Farganigan and Shainem Dank.
Du Echet.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening.
Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
Thanks for listening.
For continuous Jewish programs, TalklineNetwork.com, or our 24-hour-a-day listen line at 641-741-0389. For past shows, you can find us on iTunes, Spotify, Amazon, YouTube, Instagram, and all major podcast platforms, or jewishpodcast.org. Thanks for listening to the TalklineNetwork.com.
Talkline Network Radio, America's longest-running Jewish broadcast.